Thanks for joining us today. Hello and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Lee Ji-yoon in Seoul. Before we get started, let's first get a quick check of today's highlights. With no reasons given, China rejects requests for additional charter flights by Korean airlines, an act suspected of being tied to Seoul's THAAD deployment decision. We take a look at major economies around the world and what changes and policies we can expect in the new year. Will the global economy come back stronger in 2017? We sit down with an expert to talk about this. The number of birds killed due to the fast-spreading H5N6 bird flu virus has exceeded the 30 million mark as of Tuesday. For more, we connect to our Lee Ju-young on the phone. So, Ju-young, it looks like the numbers are growing by the day.
Ji-yoon, according to the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, the total number of chickens, ducks, and quails that have been slaughtered came to about 30.3 million since the first case was reported 49 days ago. That's the largest number of birds culled in the shortest time period. As a result, roughly 32% of egg-laying hens have been wiped out, along with nearly half of all layer breeders in the country, which has been greatly disrupting the supply of eggs. In fact, the ministry said the wholesale price of eggs has jumped to levels about 2 to 3 times higher than Western countries, including the U.S. and Canada.
But now the silver lining seems to be that the number of newly suspected cases has dropped to just 1 or 2 a day. So would we be able to say that the outbreak is now under control?
Acting President Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-ahn said the spread of the virus has significantly slowed thanks to a full-out 7-day endeavor to contain the outbreak. But he added that the fight is not over yet and that the government needs to continue carrying out thorough inspections and strengthen monitoring to put an end to the bird flu virus. This has been Lee Ju-young for Business Daily.
Some welcome news on the trade front as Korea's exports to its largest trading partner appear to be reversing negative growth seen every month since mid-2015. Seoul's Trade Ministry says on-year exports to China jumped 9.6% in December after rebounding 0.4% the previous month, setting shipments back on a positive trend. It's the first time that exports to the world's second largest economy have increased for 2 straight months since January 2015. In the final month of last year, shipments amounted to $12 billion, the highest since October of 2015. This can be attributed to improvements seen in China's manufacturers, many of which use parts from Korea. Meanwhile, some domestic airlines have been blocked from flying charter flights from China this month and the next. Without a clear reason for this unprecedented move, some say that Beijing's retaliation for Korea's THAAD decision is very much underway. Our Eunice Kim tells us more.
Korea's decision to install the U.S. missile defense THAAD battery came in July. In spite of it, the intensity by which Chinese tourists came to Korea was unwavering. In fact, numbers hit a record high in the whole of 2016, crossing the 8 million mark, representing a 34% jump from the year before when tourism had suffered under MERS virus fears. But now the fears of repercussions from Beijing are becoming more real. According to industry sources, late last month, China's Civil Aviation Administration rejected 8 chartered flight requests by Korea's Asiana Airlines, Jeju Airlines, and Jin Air. The flights were to carry vacationers from China in January and February in time for the Lunar New Year holiday. The reasons for the refusal are unknown.
Restricting charter flight operations between Korea and China is effectively like pouring cold water over growing tourism demand.
And it doesn't stop at tourism. In August, Beijing made it harder for Koreans to receive business visas. In September, sugar produced in Korea was suddenly probed for import restrictions. And in October, the thermoplastic polyacetal was investigated on anti-dumping grounds. In November, Lotte Group, which had recently expanded into China, was subjected to a comprehensive tax audit. Amid these pressures, Seoul is unrelenting. Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se recently spelled out if China's aim is to reverse the THAAD decision, the Seoul government's response will also be firm. And this is why the prevailing consensus is that economic relations between Korea and China, affected by the political climate, are shaping up to be a bumpy ride ahead. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
Analysts expect a weaker real estate market here in Korea this year, citing tighter regulations and an oversupply of housing units. It's not just institutions and banks that see a gloomy year ahead. Consumers are bearish on housing too. Our Kim Hyo-sun tells us more.
The Bank of Korea and the Korea Center for International Finance said Monday that they expect domestic real estate prices to fall this year, citing a recent report by Citigroup. The report pointed to an increase in housing supply, especially in regions outside of the Seoul metropolitan area, as the main reason. Government data projects a total of 368,000 new apartments to be available in 2017 and 18, which is well above the past 5 years' average of 235,000 and far outpacing this year's expected demand of 240,000. Moreover, market watchers expect that if interest rates rise, that could further complicate the situation. Home buying is already weighed down by a combination of household incomes rising more slowly and sky-high prices. Consumers appear to have a negative outlook for the property market, too. According to BOK survey of 2,200 households late last year, a majority of the respondents expected real estate prices to fall. The Consumer Sentiment Index on housing dropped to 97 in December, falling below the 100 mark for the first time since February 2013. Also likely to make it harder to buy and sell homes, and thus hold down prices, are tighter regulations to be phased in throughout the year on mortgage lending, including tougher income screening for borrowers. Kim Hyo-sun, Business Daily.
The year 2016 was full of surprises that set off a number of economic uncertainties. Britain voted to leave the European Union, and Donald Trump defeated the odds to become the next president of the United States. The global economy suffered from slowing growth, while Korea was rocked by a massive influence-peddling scandal. So with all this under our belt, what lies ahead in the year 2017? Let's find out.
The global economic outlook for this year looks similar to that of last year, facing the prospect of slow growth, a sea of uncertainty, and growing trade protectionism. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, who takes office this month, is considered one of the biggest risks because even if his aggressive policies succeed in boosting the American economy, they're likely to have many side effects for other countries. Then there are also elections in Germany, France, and the Netherlands, which could potentially threaten or challenge the European Union's status quo. And with Britain's expected exit from the EU, as well as instability in Italy's banking sector, the European economy is expected to see a lot of ups and downs. Experts also point to the slowing Chinese economy and whether, along with other Asian countries, it'll be able to pull itself back on a clear path towards recovery. With the OECD having bumped up its global growth projection slightly to 3.3%, all eyes will be on what lies ahead for the world economy in the new year.
And to tell us more about this, Professor Yang Jun-suk from the Catholic University of Korea joins us in the studio today. Great to have you here.
Happy to be here.
So let's start over in the United States. I mean, things are looking pretty good over in the United States and its economy, but some are even saying that once Trump takes office, the American economy could see over 3% growth this year.
Okay, well, there is a lot of Trump euphoria that's going on right now, but I think that's in major part because they're only considering part of what Trump said during the election. Now, I think everybody's most excited about the tax cuts and the infrastructure investment that Trump said he will have. But if you look at the infrastructure investment program carefully, what he said during the election and all those papers that you had in the website. It's not going to be repairing the current worn-out roads or worn-out bridges. It's going to be trying to get new investment projects, not through government funding, but through private funding through what's called a private-public partnership. So what's going to happen basically is if the government and the private sector can agree that we need a new road someplace, then the private sector will build a road. They will take toll from that road for a certain number of years, and then after a certain number of years, after they recoup the investment, they'll give it back to the government. And what Trump said is that he'll give tax cuts if the private companies do that. Now, Korea's also done something like this, the PPP projects. We did it for things like subway number 9 here in Seoul. If you can predict demand accurately, and if you are in need of a lot of infrastructure very quickly, it's not a bad strategy. You see it a lot in developing countries. But for the United States, I'm not sure if they need new infrastructure. I'm not sure if there's a lot of profit opportunities there. So they could just be a lot of air. They could give tax breaks, but no one may come because the profit opportunities are just not there. So things are not entirely clear exactly how effective a lot of these Trump policies are going to be.
Then what effect do you think his policies are going to have on other countries, including Korea?
Okay, well, he promised that he would do a lot of protectionist moves. He said that he will declare China and perhaps Korea as well as a foreign exchange rate manipulators and reconsider the FTAs. Now, there's some things that he can do by himself, some things that he requires congressional approval. Problem is, right now, the Republicans hold not only the presidency, but the both houses of Congress.
Right.
And traditionally, during the first day of a new administration, the Congress tends to give the president what he wants because he's been elected by the will of the public. So I expect at least some of the protectionist measures to go through. And that's going to be somewhat difficult for Korea. But some of the things that concern us the most, say the renegotiation on the Korea-US FTA, I think we'll probably have about a year's worth of room to see what's going to happen because, well, Trump is going to say he's going to renegotiate and then he's going to offer his negotiation plans. And I think Korea should watch out for this because given Trump's past, he tends to really give his first position tends to be really forceful and out there. So we should be careful about our negotiating strategy. We cannot always be submissive about this, especially against Trump. But even if Trump decides to get rid of the Korean-US FTA, there's a clause in there that says that you have to give 6 months warning. So we'll have at least a year to, I think, look at what Trump will actually do. And then if he does go out with these protectionist policies, then obviously it's not going to have a good effect on the rest of the world, especially China. And that's a really sad event because right now the only place that seems to be on a solid path to recovery is the United States.
Right.
So we really were hoping that U.S. would act as an engine of growth. But if Trump comes in with his policies that doesn't work as much as people expected, and these protectionist policies, that engine is going to go away.
Right, and that growth could be isolated to just the United States. Now, over in Europe, with Brexit and various elections coming up, how will the European economy look in 2017?
Okay, well, I tend to think that the problem is not in the European Union, but in euro, the single currency. Now, the problem that they have right now is that you have a lot of people moving from the poorer regions to the richer regions, as well as refugees coming into Europe. Well, the reason that people are moving from the poorer region to richer regions is, as with any place else, they're trying to find better jobs. Now, it's the euro, the currency, and the European Central Bank, the single central bank that I think keeps poorer countries poor right now. Because, well, some countries are doing very well, some countries are not doing well, but if you're using a single monetary policy for the whole region, then you cannot really fit your policy toward the poorer regions.
Right.
So they're not doing as much as they can perhaps for the poorer regions. That means fiscal policy has to take up the slack, but because they want to run a single currency and they cannot have certain regions having too much government expenditure, they're also tying their hands there. So because they cannot deal with these countries which have low growth, it's natural that those people are moving toward richer regions, and I think that's one of the major reasons why they're in danger of political chaos.
Now let's come back to our closest neighbors, China and Japan. I mean, what path are they going to take this year?
Okay, I think it's basically going to be more of the same. Now, China is picking up, I think, just a little bit because the U.S. is picking up and they're now importing more. But China does have some major problems, especially in their financial sector. The secondary financial institutions borrowed money from the banks to lend it to people who want use that money to buy real estate. So they're having some problems with the real estate right now. If a so-called bubble bursts in the real estate sector, that means a disaster for the financial sector.
Right.
China is hoping that they'll grow out of the problem, but we'll have to see whether that works. Japan, I think they are going to stick with the Abenomics because for them, it's working. It's not working very well, but it's their first policy in a long time, which is actually working. Their employment is going up. Their inflation seems to be going up. The only problem they have is that they're running a QE program and they have to buy long-term government bonds, but they seem to be running out of long-term government bonds in the private market. So they'll have to rethink some of the tactics of the program, but probably not the strategy.
Now, with the growing global trade protectionist policies and sentiment and whatnot, how should Korea prepare for all this?
Okay, well, I think the biggest problem we have now is the United States. We have some problems with China, as we saw in the last report, but China is doing things around the fringes. Because Korea and China has an FTA and because they've signed on to WTO, they don't want to touch that. So they're affecting things which are not part of that agreement, whereas what Trump wants is to just perhaps even overturn the WTO and the FTA agreements.
Right.
So if he comes down with unilateral movement against Korea or things that are contrary to the agreements that they've signed, well, I think the chances of Korea will submit because compared to the United States, we're not that big. But we really, given Trump's personality, I think we really should resist to some extent, and we can't do that by ourselves. So we're going to have to look at like-minded countries right now. I think right now is the time to prepare for possible unilateral movement by the Trump administration.
All right. Thank you so much for that outlook.
Thank you.
And that does it for today, but we'll be back tomorrow with more at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. So don't forget to tune in then. Thanks for watching and see you soon.